Good afternoon. Welcome to today's meeting of the Transportation Licensing Commission. If you'll please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that if you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the entry of the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission's decision. We advise that you seek your own independent legal advice to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met. Mr. Fields circulated prior to today's meeting the draft meeting minutes from last month's meeting on September 18th. Has the Commission had a chance to review those minutes? Yes. Is there a motion regarding their approval?
Moves for approval.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Next item on our agenda, we have other passenger vehicles for hire. We've been asked to review a new company application by Absolute Limousine Services doing business as A1 Brentwood Franklin. Mr. Fields.
The company's made application. They have been in the taxi cab business in Williamson County for several years, and are very interested in that in Nashville. We've talked a lot about. They don't want to talk about that specifically today, but they would like to be able to operate another segment of their business as a livery service. Their application is in order.
Is there a motion regarding the application?
I make a motion, we accept the application.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Application will be granted. Next, we've got a driver application, other passenger vehicle for hire by Mr. Ali Hassan.
Mr. Hassan is here. Mr. Hassan, in our procedures, if someone fails to completely disclose all of their information that could appear on their background, on the criminal background check, I'm to disapprove and bring to the Commission. He failed to list a 2010 trespassing charge. And that would not preclude him from being a driver, but because he failed to list it, he had to be here. Mr. Hassan is present.
Mr. Hassan, if you'll come forward. Did you plead guilty to trespassing in 2010?
No.
Do you understand that our rules require you to disclose all prior arrests or charges of any kind?
Yes.
And by not doing so, the Commission has the power to deny your application. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Do you know, can you explain why you didn't disclose that trespassing charge?
Well, I just didn't remember that because that's when I first came to America, and it was like I didn't remember it. I just put my speeding tickets and stuff. But I did another application, and I put that in there.
Okay.
You did complete the reapplication process.
I make a motion that we grant him the driving permit.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Next, we have a new driver application by Mr. Darren Dave. Mr. Fields.
Is Mr. Dave present? He was notified. He sent a letter. I see. The company company was going to be unable to be present with him today, so he chose not to come. Your option is you can defer to the company's president, or you can deny, based on not showing up.
Did he have any background issues?
I'm sorry?
Did he have any background issues?
No, he left off a 2008, he filed a false report on 911 would be the only thing. And again, that wouldn't preclude him from being a driver, he just failed to list.
I think it makes sense to defer it to next month if we can.
Yeah, I make a motion to defer to next month's meeting.
A second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, next item we have on the agenda is a hearing for a complaint against Abdullah Ali from Hardinian Carter. Is the complainant available?
Mr. Carter? I do not believe he's present.
Would the commission like to defer that, or do we dismiss it?
I'd suggest dismissal.
I'm going to dismiss him.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on our agenda, we have a public hearing regarding legislation to regulate the commercial use of pedicab and pedal carriage vehicles within certain portions of Nashville and Davis County. Mr. Field.
Several different groups that do pedicabs, those vehicles that are one-piece vehicles that are three-wheel, that look like bicycles, that will transport people down and transport people around, as well as in the state defines pedal carriage as a four-wheel vehicle that carries other folks. There are at least two companies operating in Nashville, the Sprocket Rocket as well as the Pedal Tavern, that operate those businesses. They've been in Nashville, and they actually approached us and asked for legislation. They've also spoken with Councilman Anthony Davis. Councilman Davis is the chairman of the Transportation Committee. He put Public Works Committee, I apologize. He put together with the assistance of legal staff in council legislation, then asked that the commission would consider it. Metro Legal has in turn had some time with it and made some other changes to it, and that's what we have presented to you today. Ms. Costello may want to describe it instead of me, but it's my impression what needs to happen today is for you to consider, is hold a public hearing, consider it, and then you would make recommendation either as it is, with changes, make changes to it, and basically, and then at that point we'd take it back to the councilman, and it would be his bill.
Have there been any formal requests to speak from the public?
Terry Clements from Convention and Visitors Corporation.
This is extremely minor, but in the interest of not diminishing the industry, on page 1 is where it's whereas the second largest industry, we're now at 12. We've hosted over 12 million visitors in the most recent year, and they spent over $6 billion.
We'd like those kind of changes.
Thank you.
And this is pedicabs and the pedal carriages.
Correct. So,
If you'll please introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Ahmed Abukar. I just went to add something that you don't know about the pedal and the golf. We find out that golf just pick up people from downtown, the highway to Metro Center on Maxwell Millennium House, which is very dangerous. Can you imagine that a golf cart going on the highway? The other thing, the bicycle, he picked up one night 3 passengers, 2 little bit heavy women, one side, and another one was the other side. So he tried to, turn quickly. They all fell down. So I don't know how safe those things working in downtown will be.
Just so you know, for the record, this is not, the golf carts are not part of this.
Okay.
discussion.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
separate issue.
Only the bicycle. Okay.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak as to this potential legislation? At this time, we'll close the public hearing and now open the matter up for deliberation amongst the commissioners.
Mr. Fields, I see the section on insurance, but I'm not seeing the minimums, or did I miss that?
There's a minimum listed of $1 million liability coverage.
Is that adequate, especially with consideration that there's alcohol being consumed on these things?
Again, their representative list on the pedal carriage side, they may be able to address that better. Based on what my understanding is, we've not had any incidents involving, that have been significant, where injuries have been involved, hitting cars and that sort of thing. Again, they have some experience. They can speak around the country and where they've been. And Ms. Costona certainly has information on insurance.
In reviewing this legislation, I involved Mr. V.C. Cobb, who's been before this commission and assisted with insurance issues previously. So this insurance provision, we actually took pretty much directly from the horse-drawn carriage insurance provision in Chapter 1254, since we felt there was some degree of just some degree to which it was analogous. He decided that with the $1 million coverage was adequate. And the provision in kind of at the top of this, let's see, the pages aren't numbered actually. It's in section 675.070B, but it's at the top of the second page that 070 kind of extends onto. Talks about liquor liability insurance for anyone who is serving or dispensing alcoholic beverages to customers. And the industry can speak to this more, but it's our understanding that they don't actually supply the alcohol in question.
They do not supply. Alcohol is brought on by whoever is renting that particular vehicle.
Legally dispensing.
Well, in at least one of the cases, again, they can speak. There are ABC folks. They actually have gone and been trained by the ABC and have those licenses, but their job is not to provide it. It's simply to, in some cases, I think they pour it.
They have a license.
And I had a little bit of a, I guess maybe kind of a threshold idea to suggest to you all, which was you all have been given kind of the expertise or authority over transportation licensing. And, what we tried to do is just make anything in this that impacted kind of another department's area of authority or expertise. We tried to just keep it consistent with whatever they have that's on the books and not change that. So, I mean, I don't know if the industry or anyone will suggest any changes to any of those other areas of law, but we kind of just put in this, they need to comply with all other areas of the law, state, metro, whatever that's applicable. And that all I would kind of see it appropriate for you all to recommend would be the aspects of the ordinance that really fall within the transportation licensing, kind of field of authority. So, like, alcohol law is not really within that. So.
That being said, thank you for bringing that to our attention. I wanted to ask you, Teresa, because it looked like there was an inconsistency in the proposed legislation in the alcohol provision under 6.75.240 between subpart B and subpart C. And I just wanted to make sure that, I could be reading it wrong, but I wanted to make sure that that's what it meant to say. Part B says that a certificate holder or pedicab driver commits an offense if he or she permits any alcoholic beverage in the pedicab.
You're right, we didn't catch that. Maybe it should say other than as provided below.
And then the other thing I wanted to just confirm is, and this is going back a few pages under section 6.75.130, the fingerprint-based criminal background investigation. for the, and this is for driver permits, I believe, applicants of driver permits. If, I wanted to make sure that this incarceration period of 5 years prior, is that consistent with our other requirements for other drivers? It seemed like a short time frame for some of the felonies listed.
It- Here's your-
I'm sorry, I'm flipping to it. Billy may know better than I do, but I think it is.
It is consistent. All of our drivers, at the present time, it's the exact same language. It's also 2 felonies in a 10-year period as well if you go further down. Clearly, you have, if you want to extend that period to a different, if you think it's not long enough, I think you can certainly make that recommendation.
That's consistent with our.
But it's
taxi.
consistent with everything else we have.
It seems like for some of the felonies listed that we might want to consider lengthening the period. And, I mean, we may even want to consider doing that for other drivers in other, for taxis or livery vehicles.
Whatever we do, I think we're going to be consistent across the board.
The way I read the language, so it talks about whether you've been convicted or released after having completed your sentence, in other words, within the 10 years. So let's say you have someone convicted of second-degree murder gets a 20-year sentence. You're actually going to look back, you could be looking back 30 years if it's within the 10 years when they completed their sentence. Or within the 5 years that they completed the sentence would then be 25 years. So,
That's an excellent point.
it's not just the date of the conviction, but it looks, the way I read it, it's also the date of when you terminated your sentence.
I see what you're saying.
I have a question about routes. Are there any limit? I was trying to find it in this proposal again where the route section is located. But are there limits on the routes?
Yes.
Which was addressing one of the issues that was brought up about being on a highway, not necessarily with a low-speed vehicle, but pedaling on the highway, which, though bicycles are on the highways now, I'm just wondering about pedaling with a passenger on the highway.
We do have provision in here that's, again, very similar to what we now have in the horse carriage, that we can establish routes or zones which they can follow. No, actually, I think but anyway, they can be established.
So
And by establishing them, what we would, and we've had some conversations about it, I think there's some just basic limitations, and there's some other things that, for instance, the pedal cabs, one of the issues is going back and forth across the bridges during ball games and that sort of thing. And the police have taken the position that they're not going to allow that kind of traffic across the bridge anyway. But what we would actually do is come back and propose some ability to restrict them, because again, as was said, we have had reports of the low-speed vehicles being well outside the downtown area, and would want to, well outside the downtown area. If you go to section 410, operating area, that would explain it a little better.
Would this be similar to the horse carriages? If they wanted a special route, I guess they would go to traffic and parking, would that allow them?
Actually, we've reserved the right, in this particular bill, reserves the right for the commission or the staff to determine routes and/or zones. So if the commission wanted to hear that, we certainly would come back to you, or staff could make some of those decisions. We always confer with traffic and parking and the police to make certain that there's no issues. We work closely together with both of them.
My other question concerns the actual vehicles being used for the Sprocket Rocket and Pedal Tavern. Mr. Fields, have you done some looking into who manufactures these? I know there's a vehicle requirement in section 6.75.320. But in general, what do you find as far as the quality of these vehicles and safety?
From what I've been able to learn, both of them, they're actually manufactured by two different companies, one in Minnesota and one in Arizona. Well, anyway, two different companies manufacture two different kind of vehicles. Again, they can describe the vehicles much better than I can, but we've based on the way I think they're being built, we think they're safe, and we're going to ask the companies to maintain them and certify to us that they continue to be serviceable.
There's representatives from the companies here?
Both companies, yes, sir.
I don't want to belabor this, but I'd like to hear what they're doing about safety for people who may get inebriated, or in general, safety about people who are traveling on these vehicles, since we're responsible for public safety. We have two companies, right? Could somebody step up?
You want me to come up there or stay back here?
Please.
Please.
He's been injured since the last time we met. I did not have any responsibility.
You didn't fall off one of the carriages, did you?
Can you please introduce yourself?
Sure, my name's Emmett Martin, and I'm the owner of the Sprocket Rocket. So our bikes are made out of Arizona. A manufacturer named Robert Meyer. The gentleman who actually built our bike builds off-road vehicles, and I don't know the exact language, but I wasn't prepared to answer this, but I could go back and get you more information. But he has done something with his bike that's gone through a federal, so they're actually registered. They've done all the safety requirements that any other vehicle would have.
Are there seat belts?
Mm-hmm. There are seat belts, but actually the seat belts are probably a little bit more not safe, because if somebody is sitting down and they're seated in and they fall down, then they're just going to be dragged.
What provisions or policies do you have about dealing with people who may become inebriated? Is there a limit of number of alcoholic beverages they can consume? Or
Well, we have self-governed ourselves on that, because we don't want people out there wasted, giving us a bad name. Liability-wise, from a company standpoint, it doesn't do us any good to allow people to get as drunk as they want to be. So we will remove people if we feel like they're unsafe. We obviously are monitoring what they're drinking, because we have a bartender on the bartender host on the bike that is actually serving them. So if they show up and they're obviously drunk, they're not allowed on the bike. We've actually prevented people from coming on the bike, and we will stop people from drinking too much, because we're actually in control of it.
is it your company that has the ABC approved servers, certified servers?
I can't speak for their company, but some of ours are, yes.
Not all of them?
Not all of them.
Okay. Now, you're calling it a bike. How many people ride on this unit?
So it's really interesting, because I don't really know what to call it. I mean, it's a bike, but then it's a vehicle, so that's always an interesting thing as to exactly what it is. But ours fits 16.
Okay. And
10
that's-
people can pedal, and then 6 people can sit without pedals.
And you'll have 2 employees there, one who's driving the vehicle?
We have a driver, and then we have a host in the middle that's watching the people.
Can the rocket or bike, whatever.
Sprocket Rocket, yes, sir.
Be rented out for parties or things of that nature?
So,
With non-alcohol?
oh yes, we actually do kids parties also. That's why I don't have alcohol in the name. That was the purpose of it.
One of the concerns I have, because I've seen them down on Broadway and around town, is Nashville's a tourist center, and
Yes, sir.
I would be very discouraged if there were people intoxicated riding around town, giving us giving tourists that come here a bad impression of our community. What do you?
Well, the Pedal Tavern's been around for 5 years, and they've done a great job. I don't think there's ever been any issues with their company. We've been around since April. We haven't had any issues. The industry as a whole, I haven't found actually any issues anywhere in any city. I haven't found any. I think there was maybe one wreck of a cart that was turning a corner too fast. And they can, speak to see if they've seen anything, but I haven't seen any kind of issues anywhere, to be honest with you. I mean, it's a low-speed vehicle, and if you're a company like the Sprocket Rocket and the Pedal Tavern, you take your company very serious, and you don't want to present yourself in an unprofessional way. So we don't allow anything too crazy. I mean, they're having fun, obviously. They're singing, they're doing their Nashville music thing, but in no way do we want to represent ourselves in a bad way, or our city.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay. Give me 10 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me, could we hear from Pedal Tavern?
My name is Brian Gleason. I'm the operations manager with Pedal Tavern, also a part owner. Our company is, the bikes that we have are the original concept bikes in the world. They're manufactured in the Netherlands, and we have a distributor here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who ships them over and then runs a franchise to other cities. We have them in over 20 cities in the United States. This business was brought over in 2007. We have been operating in Nashville. We're one of the original cities. I think we were the fourth one in the nation to have these bikes running here in Nashville. In the 4 years we've run, we've had over nearly 80,000 tourists and riders on our bikes here in Nashville alone. And we haven't had any incidents. We haven't any accidents, any major injuries, any negative claims against our insurance. We take our business very serious. I agree with Emmett on that side of it. All it takes in this industry is one issue to have your whole investment, your whole business shut down. And not only as an individual city, but to represent more of a franchise that's throughout the nation. We all are very tight-knit and stringent when it comes to how we operate and what we expect out of our drivers as far as control when we're on the streets. We also have a policy, it's clearly stated on our website, anybody shows up to their tour intoxicated will not be allowed on. And then also along the tour, at any time, it's to give you an understanding, since this is a pedal-powered vehicle and our riders are providing the power, it is actually pretty hard to get highly intoxicated on it if you were doing the work. It's a workout. Don't let it fool you. It looks like it's moving easy, but that is, when you have people on there, it's 4,000 pounds, including the people, that they have to move with their legs. So it turns into more of a challenge than it is just a drinking binge for them. We bring them to different places, different locations for pictures. We bring them to places to get food. And by the time the tour is done, they really haven't had the opportunity to get so intoxicated that they're going to cause injury to themselves or make it a hazard. Not saying that couldn't happen, but our drivers are also strictly trained to make sure they monitor that and they keep that under control. At any time, if anybody shows any signs that they aren't in the right mind or in the right condition to be riding on the Pedal Tavern, they're not allowed to get back on, and we will call them a cab and send them back to their hotel or wherever they were at. As far as the vehicles themselves, they are strong and sturdy. They're built with automotive parts, except for the guts and the drivetrain, which are bicycle parts, which move them. So as far as the way they're built, we'd be more than happy to, if anybody would be interested in coming and looking at our bikes, personally, we'd be more than happy to show, but they are about as strong and sturdy as they could come.
How many do you have in the city?
We have 8, but we do not operate 8. We operate 5 to 6 right now, and then our other bikes are there for promotional advertising stuff. We'd like to expand and start a brewery tour here in the next couple months to bring people to some more of the local areas in Nashville to see the breweries and such. With those 8 bikes that we have, a couple of them we do events. If there's filming, we've done a lot of things with the CMT award shows. We were on the award shows this year. We did a red carpet event for them. So we always want a bike also for promotional stuff.
Do you have a server?
We do. That's something we're actually.
Do you regularly use servers on the bike?
We hadn't up until this year. We had off and on, but it was kind of, we were doing individual driver, and then people weren't allowed to get their own drinks, what would happen is at each stop, because we have a scheduled route. They're not just out wandering around. So at each stop, we'd send them into one of our partner locations, and then when they came back, if they needed anything, he would prepare them with anything they needed before they left, and then he would drive. This year, moving forward, we're looking at adding a host also, because we think that's possibly a good idea. We haven't seen a need for it. We haven't seen any negative effect by not having one, but it might be something we've been looking at doing also.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Billy,
Sure.
I remember reading the proposed document that we have here. There was an alcohol limit of like 10% by volume. Does that sound familiar? So I'm looking at your website, and it says that beer, wine, and liquor is allowed. Will that impact your business if only beer was allowed, anything under 10%?
It may. We've seen it in the past. Perfect example is in Milwaukee. That's one of our partners. They had their alcohol taken away at one point when they went through regulation, and for those next 2 years, their business fell off completely to the point where they were almost having to shut down. And then this year, it was the businesses around that petitioned to get alcohol back on because they were losing such business by not having these people brought to their establishments.
Well, this would just limit you just to beer, I would assume, because liquor and wine are going to be, of course, higher than 10%.
Right. I don't see it. It will make it harder for us as far as the control. We will just have to definitely be on top of that. But as far as the business goes, I don't think it would negatively affect it to a point where it would hurt us too bad.
Well, you said that you make scheduled stops at partner locations. I'm
Right.
assuming that people get off the bikes, go in there to buy their drinks.
Right.
I'm thinking to leave it open simply because they've been operating anyways. And people, if they want to spend their money in this city, I mean, we're talking about public safety, but they have to try.
In the conversations that we'd had, and I may have misunderstood, it was my impression that the idea of a 10% by weight law came out of the industry. For us, first of all, we would not be particularly regulating that other than working with the Beer Board and the Metropolitan Police Department on issues like that. You could, I think, and I'll look over, could they put language to, that would say, would comply with local, state, and federal law?
We do have language like that in there.
So if I think what Commissioner Patel's asking, if they wanted to rewrite or make recommendation of that particular section,
Oh, I see.
what did you have in mind, Commissioner?
Well, I'm just putting it out there for the commission to discuss. I'm looking at their website, and it states that they allow beer, liquor, and wine. So I'm not sure why we're in this draft legislation are limiting it. I'd love to hear from fellow commissioners about it.
Mr. Gleason, did your industry recommend this limit here at 10%, or was?
No, we didn't. That was brought after any talks we had. We had talked to Councilman Davis about it at our meeting, and that was the first it was brought up to us.
Let me ask you, typically how long does your typical tour last?
We do a 2.5-hour tour. We have our own central location. It's a building we lease on Demumbrian, and we're part of Demumbrian Hill. We have 1,500 square feet up there that we have a small retail space, and that's where all our groups come to check in and get on the bikes, get ready. So that takes in a little bit part of their time. And then the travel to downtown is 30 minutes. And then typically from there, at their stops, they're usually in the stops for 30 minutes or so for each stop. So actual pedal time that they're traveling on the streets per tour is probably 30 to 40 minutes of that time. The rest of the time they're in the establishments. But it's a 2.5-hour tour.
How many stops on that tour?
It kind of depends on the group, how quick they're moving. If they're spending too much time in one stop, it's going to cramp their time for the other. But typically it's 3 stops, I would say, on average. That could be 2 or it could be 4, but I'd say 3 is typically the average.
You guys quantify how many drinks maybe on average your patrons might do on the tour?
Typically, in that 2.5-hour time period, they usually have one when they're starting, and they usually never finish it by the time they get to the first stop because they're pedaling. It's usually there when they get back, and they usually finish that one, maybe go to a second. So I'd say maybe on the actual bike, they're probably having three 3 to 4 drinks in that three-hour time period.
Logistically, how's it working right now? Like, this proposed legislation would require that all the drinks would have to be in plastic or foam cups.
Right. That's actually a rule that we've always had from day one. We didn't want to act like we're some party advertising alcohol on the streets. So we've always had, we provide cups, we provide souvenir cups that they can get, and then also we've always ran where they have to have a cup or a koozie that cannot be showing alcohol signage while they're on the bikes. So our biggest thing is typically beer. That's the easiest thing. People can grab it at the gas station on the way over. They get a case of beer. So typically they just put it in a koozie, which is just a Nashville Pedal Tavern koozie, doesn't show the alcohol signage. So that's typically what 90% of our riders do. If they don't, then they pour it into a cup while they're on the bikes.
I take it people with disabilities probably could not get up on the bike and ride, can they?
We actually have had quite a few people in wheelchairs. There's room in the bike to store their wheelchair, and we put them on the back bench. There are a few non-pedal seats on the bike. The back of the bike has a bench, and then also there's a couple pedal seats, what look like pedal seats over the wheel wells, where they're actually sitting on the wheel well instead of having pedals. So for anybody that's disabled or has issues pedaling, we have that option for them. We've actually done quite a few. It's kind of an annual thing with the YMCA, their senior program, where they're seniors in this program and come and do like a food, they call it grub crawl, which is actually now there's another company doing that, but that was kind of their name for it. And they go and get an appetizer at one stop, and the next stop they go get lunch, and the next stop they go get dessert. So I mean, that's senior citizens taking that.
Do you have the electric assisted motor?
We do not, and it is an option from our manufacturer to have, but with our experience in the industry, we see that it just causes more issues for us as a company. It opens up to more liability, and just we like the fact that our riders need to be responsible for moving the bike. It gives them a little bit more pride in what they're doing, and it also makes it more of an accomplishment that they're the ones moving the bike. And it also, in our minds, it keeps everybody safer that way.
To your knowledge, does the industry have insurance on the carriages when they're in operation?
Yes. Yes.
$1 million policy
Oh,
currently?
yes, we have a very rock solid policy, which is a national policy. There's a company that insures, I'd say 90% of these bikes throughout the country, and it's the same company. And it does have a separate policy that we have to carry for alcohol, as opposed to just the bike and its liability.
Mr. Fields, is there I know with horse carriages, we have a weather limitation, isn't that correct?
We do.
Is there one in here?
There's not.
Is that something we should consider, especially if it's 100 degrees outside and I'm sure you guys have a weather.
We have our own policy. Any sort of rain or sleet, anything that could be freezing, or anything that could cause drivers on the road is our main concern. Us to be visible, them not to see us. We won't run tours in downpours. Our insurance policy has a lightning policy. So if there's lightning out, then we need our riders to either go inside and wait it out, or we will cancel the tours also. As far as the heat goes, it's just that is something we decided. Anything where the heat index, not the actual temperature, goes over 100, then we cancel or give the opportunity to give refunds and cancel tours also.
I would propose that we put a weather restriction in this.
Can that be done by rule?
What it would be done by motion, and basically what you would be doing, since this is not an administration bill, this is really the council members' bill, basically all you're doing is making a recommendation. So what you might be doing is saying that you would recommend the bill as drafted if an amendment could be added to it to include a weather restriction.
To address something that Mr. Patel brought up about the alcoholic content, I mean, it may be that, we might want to put some different, or propose some different language, like maybe allowing wine and beer as opposed to just saying 10% by weight, to give passengers, the greater flexibility, but still addressing maybe the policy reason by why having this provision the way it is by excluding liquor.
Or an alternative would be to go back to the industry's take it as it is and say, if the industry wants to make that change, then work with the councilman, but you
Right.
certainly could do either one.
I have another question. How does this work usually? Do you have 16 seats like the other company?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And do people call up, reserve the carriage, and then they fill it up with the number of people they have, and then they go out on the tour?
Right. We do all by reservation. At no time do we ever solicit people or try to pick people off out the streets. We run everything as an operation, as a tour, and
How
it's
much
a
is the
scheduled
tour?
tour. Weekdays, our tour rates are, I have to refer to Angie on that, $380 for the entire bike on weekdays and $430 on the weekends. Otherwise, we do also offer what we call public tours, where you're allowed to just reserve individual seats, and then you're on the tour with other individuals. If you only have a small group of 3 or 4, then you get put on one with other small groups, and at that point, it's $35 a seat.
Just so we're really clear, this is strictly you bring your own alcoholic beverage.
Absolutely,
And if someone would have a non-alcoholic tour, that would be an option. as well.
absolutely, yes.
Does the carriages have flashing lights or brake lights?
Yes.
Are they electric, working, battery?
Yes, I'll speak for ours, just because I don't know exactly what the other manufacturers have, but we have headlights, we have blinkers on the front and the back, and those blinkers, we have four-way flashing anytime we're on the road, and then we also use those as turn signals. We've installed our own running lights, because our roof is the widest part of the bike to cover the passengers. So we're installing running lights. Some of our bikes already have them, and the rest of them are getting them right now. They're just LED, same thing you see on trucks, the running LED amber lights on the corners of the bike. We have a battery that's on the bike that runs all of that, and the radio. We also have overhead lights in the bike that will light up the bike, just basic overhead lights.
Mr. Fields, is that in this? I'm skimming through it. I'm just thinking.
There are, if you go to 3.20, it talks specifically about it has to be a unibody frame construction, 3 wheels. That's for the pedicab, but they all have. The pedal-carriage has a uniform construction, 4 wheels, rubber on the wheels, headlight with beam of at least 300 feet, flashing tail light, side-mounted mirrors, turn signals, working running lights, hydraulic disc brakes. So yes, the things he's describing are actually in the ordinance.
The only thing in that ordinance that we don't have, and it's the only reason why we don't, is because it won't function with the way our bikes are built, is side-mounted mirrors. What we have is a panoramic mirror above the driver that looks out to the sides, because you have passengers running along the side, so you put anything on the side, it would have to stick out into the other lanes of traffic to be able to see behind them. So the one above us sees down and around them to the outsides. So the side-mounted mirrors is the only thing we're having a problem trying to figure out how that would function with our bikes.
So we could actually propose or make a recommendation that we have a panoramic side mirror or a panoramic mirror, I would assume?
Or appropriate mirrors to be able to, detect traffic in the rear.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
Because there is a qualification of basically detecting traffic 200 feet from the rear of the pedicab, so.
Are there any other sections of the proposed legislation that you see problematic from an industry standpoint, like the panoramic rearview mirror?
There was one other section. I don't know if it was. I don't have it with me. If it only entailed the pedicabs instead of the pedal carriages, but it says reflective reflectors on the spokes of the wheels. We have what is a vehicle wheel. Thank you. And our vehicle wheels, it's a steel solid wheel like you would have on a car. So there's no really to stick a reflector to it. It's not like a bicycle spoked wheel. And we have lights and reflectors and everything like a vehicle all over our bike. So that was the only part where it may be an issue, but I don't know if that was only pertaining to the pedicabs.
It's not.
Okay.
I think it only pertains to the pedicab.
Okay.
Mr. Fields, on section 6.75.320, the vehicle requirements, item number 12, it says no more than one trailer may be attached. Then the very next section, the B section, number 11, it says trailers are prohibited. So it's kind of inconsistent.
Pedicabs versus.
So is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Looking at the carriages.
Mr. Fields, you control the advertising on this, right? not control it, but if they were to come and start advertising for XYZ down the street.
There's actually a section in here that specifically talks about advertising.
X down the street.
The provision actually says that the companies can advertise, they just can't have bumper stickers.
Correct. What would you, that we would actually generate rule, this commission would generate rules to,
Relate to the
that would
advertising.
relate to advertising.
Jim,
That,
we need to say that.
it does. It's sort of in there. It's, that's what I was just trying to find, but it's actually in there that talks specifically about advertising.
What about training on your driver?
Say that again?
Training for your driver or your steerers, whatever you call it.
Right. Our drivers do ride-along trainings for typically about a month before they're allowed out on their own. And our tour manager is here with us today, and he typically oversees all of our drivers before they're allowed during their training. And then for their final ride-along, either myself or Angie, who's our general manager, we do a ride-along with them to see how to make sure they're prepared to go out on their own.
Being downtown with the horse carriages, have there been any incidents between them and the pedal carriages?
No, we seem to get along. We seem to get along with everybody very well. We stay out of everybody's way, and we typically are really friendly with each other.
You are sensitive to our interest that we project a positive image of Nashville.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because you're right in the heart of our tourist center.
Absolutely. Yes. That is, that's number one for us. We are very proud to be a part of the city and its tourism, and we want to make sure we reflect Nashville in every possible way. Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for
Sure.
for you speaking with us.
I appreciate it.
Commissioners, it looks like there are at least two areas where we might have suggestions for the council. One is just looks like is a typographical error in reference to section 240B, where there's a reference where alcohol is not permitted, and then the second area is perhaps making further clarification that a panoramic mirror or side-mounted mirror would be sufficient. Are there any other areas that people would like to address on the front end before we just send it back to the council?
I would like the weather requirement to be in there. We've got horse carriages and it directly affects public safety.
Mr. Fields said that we could also address that by our own rule apart from the legislation.
Well, I mean, the public hearing is closed. He was indicating he wanted to speak.
Gotcha. Ms. Teresa, should we address the proposed weather restrictions as part of the legislation, or should that be a rule of the Transportation Licensing Commission?
There would have to be provision within the legislation to enable the Transportation Licensing
Gotcha.
Commission to make rules addressing that issue.
Then that is something you're saying we should certainly put in there.
Do we have note of the suggested changes on page 1 of 6 billion?
Yes, sir.
And the largest industry?
It's the second largest industry with 12 million visitors a year.
12 million.
12
and
million.
$6 billion impact.
So we changed it. I would recommend that we change the 10 to 12 and the 3 to 6.
Hey, Teresa, I have one other question, and this may not be related to this at all, but let me ask it. There is one other company locally doing the same type of business, but is a car, an open-air car, called the Party Barge, I believe, that essentially does the same thing, but obviously you don't pedal.
They're not licensed.
So,
I said they're not licensed.
that was my question.
Yeah, I mean, this particular ordinance wouldn't address them. What would address them would be Chapter 674, other passenger vehicles for hire.
Okay.
If they are a motor vehicle, a car, basically, and they provide rides for hire, then they're required to
Okay.
be licensed under that other
I
chapter.
just wanted to bring that up, thank you.
But because we did this chapter because that chapter specifically says that that applies to motorized vehicles.
Yep.
And so we have some state law and, just general charter authority that enables us to regulate these pedicabs and pedal carriages.
Thank you for clarification.
On that particular vehicle, there have been some questions raised about, do we have authority from the standpoint of size and number of people it can carry?
That's true, we
And
have
if-
authority under state law if there's 15 or more
Yeah.
passengers.
So 15 or more, including the driver, we don't have authority, but we're certainly in contact with them, and we anticipated that and actually created a definition in the 674 that you would hear next week to talk about the unique, the vehicles that are not exactly, they're not the normal vehicles.
That's fine, I just want to make sure everybody's on a level playing field.
There is a representative from the pedicab industry here, from Nashville Pedicab. I failed to recognize, and I apologize, so he is here and could address anything you have on the pedicabs as well.
I'm PJ Lynch with Nashville Pedicab. And if you guys have any questions, which it doesn't seem like you do, I'd be glad to answer them. The only thing I would like to speak to is in regards to making a suggestion about working during weather permitted things, if that is just a pedal tavern or a pedicab thing. I know we're being lumped together right now, but our guys get to choose when they work, whereas like maybe someone who purchases a ticket for something may not want to ride in the rain, but like I would like our guys to have the ability to, if it's over 100 degrees, like we operate in New Orleans and horse carriages do go in, and because horses don't really have the choice of whether they get to operate or not, but our riders do, and they don't have to come in, but if they want to come in, give them the ability to come in. So I just wanted to speak to that, and I think it's a great idea. I just don't know if it applies to pedicabs the same way that it applies to pedal taverns.
So what you're saying, since your peddler is the person who operates the unit
Yeah.
versus those who are guests being invited to do the pedaling, if you want to pedal at 110 degrees, it's on your own.
Exactly.
It's not a public safety, is what you're suggesting.
Exactly.
What about other weather conditions like rain, ice, sleet?
I mean, when there's lightning, like we won't be out there. But like for rain and sleet, I guess if someone truly wanted to go out, we have the ability to fully uncover the people in the back of the pedicabs. So the guy who is driving the pedicab, yeah, he's going to get wet and he's going to be cold. But if he thinks that he can go out and make money and provide a service to the people who are here, why not give him the ability to do that?
Because, I'll give you why. Because you're inviting a guest to get into the pedicab in conditions that might be dangerous. And while the driver can assume that risk, I go on my bicycle, I assume the risk if I go out in bad weather, but I'm not bringing a guest in.
Yeah, and I would say that the mechanics of a bicycle and a pedicab are a little different, where we have a hydraulic disc brake, so the bike's going to stop. It's not going to go anywhere, and I think obviously in times that it's icy out and snowing, you won't see pedicabs, but really it's more pertaining to heat. Like if guys want to work in the summer heat, let them work in the summer heat.
And if we put in our regulations that the Transportation Licensing Commission can make rules related to this, we can discuss it then.
Right.
And have a public hearing and go through all that.
Yeah.
I mean, the fun part of whether they should be out there with a big aluminum arm in the back in a lightning storm. We could go through that at the time.
Yeah, this is, right now, we're just considering whether to put proposed legislation in the proposed statute that would give us the power to regulate the industry with respect to weather requirements.
Okay, sounds good.
Did you see anything in the proposed legislation that was going to cause your industry difficulties right now?
No, I think it's a really well-written ordinance, and I appreciate the fact that you guys are really proactive about doing this before. Usually in other cities, things get out of hand and it's all retroactive, and you are then trying to fit an industry into a mold, and this has been really great. It's very refreshing.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Do any of our commissioners have a motion with regard to this proposed legislation?
Could we outline Could you just outline again the areas that you thought we had some concerns about?
Right. The first had to do with what appeared to just to be a Scrivener's error in 6.75.240B. And that pertains to the as it stands right now, it's a prohibition on a pedicab driver permitting an alcoholic beverage in the pedicab.
I think we still would want to keep in that it would be an offense if they provide or stock alcoholic
Correct.
beverages in the pedicab. So I guess on further thought, we might want to tweak that just a little bit more. That we only the permission of alcoholic beverages in the pedicab would be as provided below, and not the provision and stocking of alcohol.
Let me, maybe I'm are we is this subpart B is only pertaining to pedicabs, not pedal carriages?
Oh, you're right. That's why. Never mind. We don't need to fix that
So
at all.
it's not an error, is that right?
It's not an error. I'm sorry. I missed it both times.
Okay, well, it's my fault. I brought it up for the first time.
So we're saying no alcoholic beverages in pedicabs?
In pedicabs, period.
And I don't think the pedicabs do that, but I mean, the gentleman who's here.
They're saying they don't.
Do you guys ever have a passenger that comes with a drink?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys don't mind taking out, it definitely, we pick up a lot of passengers from bars and move them to other bars.
That's what I was thinking.
So I think in some of our other cities, they're open container cities, like in Savannah and New Orleans, so it's not really been an issue. So yeah, that is kind of an oversight on us. Yeah, if you guys would like to take that out and put us in the same group as the pedal taverns, we would really appreciate that.
Well, I think it's a lot easier to do, especially since none of the passengers are pedaling. They've got a driver. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, they have a driver.
Yeah, there's an open container law in Nashville, though.
Well, we've tried to, yes, Mr.
I'm Terry Clements again with the Convention and Visitors Corporation. Last year when we were going through the to-go cup issue, if you will, what the police told us is there is currently a law that allows you to have a drink in a container, but it's not the original container. So that if you have a six-pack in the trunk of your car and pour it into a cup and walk around with that drink, not intoxicated, but walk around with that drink that not in the original container, then the police, in theory, don't have reason to cite you. So yes, we do have an open container, but there is that exception for a not in the original container.
Mr. Clemens, do you have any concern with the alcohol statement, making it 10% or less, or would you like to open it up? What would you like for the city?
Well, I like the direction that you were going with this. This reflects on the city. The other thing is we have, by a number of circumstances, become sort of the bride and bridesmaids capital of the country. It's the place to come and have your party. And that's a pretty cool thing. When you see all of them in sashes and tiaras and on one of the pedal taverns, it's pretty cool and they're having a great time. So I don't want to restrict their having a good time, but there's always limits and moderation.
And my other thought on that is that you got beer, you've got wine, and someone wanted to have margaritas. It's not much of a fine line between those three. As long as it's done in moderation and still reflects well on the city.
It seems as though companies are regulating themselves quite well, especially by not picking up passengers if they're intoxicated or kicking them off. So.
Ms. Costonis has provided me with some language from another statute that we're circulating now, and that's where the current proposed language in the pedal carriage section 240 came from. And
where did this come from?
I'll let Ms. Costonis
Yeah, I
say
can explain.
exactly where it came from.
It's an existing provision of the Metropolitan Code of Laws. It's in a different chapter, Title VII, Chapter 24, which is not a chapter that this commission usually has anything to deal with. But it seemed to me to have some potentially applicable provisions, so we suggested revising some portion of the language of 240 to kind of be consistent with it. And, you know, I mean, I don't know if anyone from MNPD is here and is familiar with it, maybe they'd be the most informed people to speak to it, because I assume that's one that they enforce.
Well, I see in the proposed legislation right now, pedal carriages, you can only have a plastic or foam cup.
Yes.
So at a minimum, if we're gonna let a petty cab have alcohol for its passenger, it would have to be in a plastic or foam cup.
I would think that if the ordinance applies to one, it applies to another.
I think there are four things that you'd like, at this point, I want to make sure that I'm taking good notes. You have issues, you'd like for the commission to have some authority over weather restrictions. You'd like for the council to consider new language regarding the issue of mirrors, both side, or the side mirror. You have issues with making sure that pedicabs could have alcohol in them, but couldn't be stocked or sold by the pedicab. And then issues on the 10% rule that you were just discussing.
You know, personally for me, on the 10% rule, I think we probably should leave that for another commission to regulate.
Or the Metro Council.
Or the Metro Council itself.
Where's weather fall?
Weather, I mean, I feel like that is appropriate for you all to look at. It does seem like a transportation safety related issue, and it's certainly something that we already regulate in the horse-drawn carriage context. So I think it would be appropriate for you all to include a recommendation that the bill be recommended subject to an amendment that would give you all the authority to do some rulemaking with regard to weather restrictions.
I think that's good.
And we would also correct the economic information that was provided by Mr. Clemens.
Do we want to take these individually as a motion or group them?
You can do it either way.
If you'd like to take a stab at the motion and bundle it.
I'll make it.
I'll second it, whatever it comes out.
I'll try.
No, he didn't mean that.
All right, I'm going to make a motion. The first one would be that the ordinance would be approved with the recommendation that there be a provision for this commission to provide regulation rules regarding weather restrictions for both pedicabs and petty carriages. Secondly, that under 6.75.320B, that the council, that we recommend that the council would modify subsection A8 regarding side-mounted mirrors for petty carriages.
I think it's B7.
B7? Okay, I stand corrected. If I may amend that motion to B7, that the council consider language that side-mounted mirrors or an overhead mirror that provides a view of at least 200 feet from the rear of the petty carriage. That a recommendation that on the first page it be under the third whereas, that it be amended to reflect 12 million visitors to Nashville each year and a 6 billion annual. Next part of that recommendation would be under 6.75.320C, that the council look at some language that would consider allowing beer, wine, and other alcoholic beverages. subject to the council's wisdom as to the best way to effectuate the policy of safety for the public. Did I leave anything out, Mr. Fields or Chairperson?
I don't believe so.
All right, that's my motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. I would just say to the industry people here, thank you for your information. That was very helpful. I would urge you, if there are specific sections that you would like the council to address, then by all means, take it up with your representative so you can have those concerns addressed. To the extent they've fallen outside of our realm as the Transportation License Commission, we obviously don't, can't necessarily make legislation, and there are areas where we have deferred. For example, with what types of alcohol to allow. So I would take that up with the council. Is there any other business, Mr. Fields?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Darren Dave has arrived, and earlier you took action to defer consideration of his application. He is present, and if you would like to...
Sure, let's take it up. Mr. Dave?
I think you may have to reconsider your earlier action on Mr. Dave's case.
Is there a motion regarding reconsideration of Mr. Dave's application from deferring to November?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Mr. Fields, if you could just remind us about Mr. Dave's application.
Mr. Dave had applied to be a driver, be a taxi cab driver. He failed to list filing a false report on a 911. It was in 2008. It does not affect, it would not prohibit him from being a driver, but since he failed to list it, he has to appear in front of you.
Mr. Dave, do you understand why your application was brought before us and not approved by Mr. Fields?
Yes, sir.
And that it was because you failed to disclose that prior citation?
Yes, I wasn't even charged with that. When I appeared in court, it was dismissed.
It asks you to list each violation of federal, state, or local law in which you have ever been charged, whether convicted or not, including expungements. Do you understand?
Yes, I
So
completely forgotten about it.
It's very important that with respect to these applications that all the applicants disclose everything so
Yes,
we
sir.
can make an informed decision about the application. Is there a motion regarding Mr. Dave's application?
Motion to approve his application.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Any other business, Mr. Fields?
Next Thursday at 1:30, you'll be holding a special meeting for a public hearing to consider 6.74 the vehicles for hire. That meeting will be out on the Fulton campus in the Howard School building in the Sunny West Conference Center. Same room we had the other meeting in earlier this year, so we'll be convening at 1:30 next Thursday, October 3rd.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Motion passes.